Rephrase script for GeoScope intro. Welcome to GeoScope, your window into global power shifts and economic crosswinds. President Trump's sudden decision to double steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% sent shockwaves across industries, ripples that are still being felt today. By August 1st, a 35% tariff on Canadian exports pushed North America into a full-blown trade war. Canada retaliated hard. Prime Minister Mark Carney closed U.S. supply routes, redirected steel toward Europe and Asia, and kick-started a wave of clean tech investments at home. Detroit's auto plants stalled, Alberta cut off pipelines. This was no longer just about steel, it marked a seismic shift in trade, power, and manufacturing across the continent. Tier 1 tariffs to turmoil, when protection backfires. What began as a bold attempt to revive U.S. industry quickly spiraled into chaos. The promise was simple: protect American jobs by making foreign steel more expensive. The reality, however, was far more complex. In a globally connected economy, the line between protection and self-sabotage is dangerously thin, and the first casualty is often logic. Earlier this summer, the simmering trade dispute boiled over. President Trump abruptly doubled tariffs on Canadian steel to an unprecedented 50%. The official justification was shocking. He linked the punitive measure to Canada's supposed failure to curb fentanyl trafficking. The claim was immediately and forcefully refuted. Then, Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, a Canadian, publicly dismissed it as a baseless and damaging fiction, a sentiment echoed by Ottawa, which saw the move not as a security measure, but as a hostile economic attack disguised in inflammatory rhetoric. Markets, already on edge, reacted instantly and violently. The Dow plunged as investors fled from the uncertainty. With its primary competitor sidelined, domestic steel giant Nucor hiked its price for hot-rolled coil steel to an eye-watering $900 per ton in just 2 weeks. This wasn't just a price adjustment, it was a shockwave that rippled through the entire American economy, threatening every sector from construction to appliance manufacturing. But the epicenter of the crisis was the auto industry. U.S. automakers like Ford, GM, and Stellantis were blindsided. Their entire business model is built on a deeply integrated cross-border supply chain. Ford's F-150, the quintessential American truck, requires a full ton of steel. For decades, a steady flow of up to 12 million tons of high-grade steel annually from Canada was the lifeblood of this just-in-time manufacturing system. The tariff didn't just raise costs, it severed a vital economic artery. The consequences were swift. By mid-July, Canadian steel orders had completely dried up. The rail shipments that crisscrossed the border daily halted. At Ford's historic River Rouge plant, a century-old symbol of American industrial might, the assembly lines sat idle. The silence was a deafening testament to a policy gone wrong. The S&P 500 dipped 0.75%, a seemingly small number that represented billions in lost wealth and a crisis of investor confidence. Analysts, struggling to describe the targeted downturn, coined a new phrase: Trump's metal recession. Across the river in Windsor, Ontario, a city whose fate is welded to Detroit's, fear spread fast. For communities built around this singular industry, the news was catastrophic. Fourth-generation Ford worker Kristen Lawton described the feeling as life-changing uncertainty, a sentiment that echoed in homes on both sides of the border. The very workers the tariffs were meant to help were the first victims. Michigan's jobless rate jumped to 5.4%, suddenly the highest in the nation. Meanwhile, Canada's steel furnaces in Hamilton didn't go cold. Instead, they roared to life with a new strategy. Faced with an unreliable partner, Ottawa began a rapid and aggressive pivot. It started seeking new markets, strengthening other alliances, and fundamentally repositioning itself on the global stage. Not merely as America's supplier, but as a strategic gatekeeper of a critical global resource. Top 2. Carney's steel Gambit clean tech meets cold strategy. If Trump flexed muscle with blunt tariffs, Carney played chess, seeing the board several moves ahead. Within a breathtaking 48 hours, Ottawa launched a $1 billion program to fundamentally decarbonize its steel industry. This wasn't a minor tweak, it was a strategic overhaul, replacing antiquated coal-fired furnaces with state-of-the-art electric arc and green hydrogen systems. The goal was to transform a legacy industry into a high-tech, future-proof powerhouse, turning a potential liability into a national asset. But this ambitious green initiative was hiding a razor-sharp edge. It wasn't just about green energy, it was a sophisticated trade weapon, disguised in the language of climate action. Carney was forging a green shield that would double as a trade sword, turning environmental policy into a powerful tool of economic statecraft. First, the defensive perimeter. Canada slapped a punishing 25% tariff on Chinese-origin steel, directly targeting unfairly priced, carbon-intensive imports. Then, it imposed strict quotas on steel from all non-free trade agreement nations. This was a crucial move to close the back door, preventing other countries from simply rerouting cheap steel and undermining the domestic industry's transformation. Next, securing the home front. The government mandated that major domestic projects, new housing, critical pipelines, public transit, must be built with this new, clean Canadian steel. This masterstroke created a guaranteed domestic market, de-risking the massive investment for producers. The entire supply chain was reinforced, powered by Canada's abundant hydro and nuclear energy. The timing was flawless. Carney had anticipated Europe's 2026 Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, a coming tax on carbon-intensive imports. Because Canada's steel was already 93% emissions-free, it was perfectly positioned for exemption. For European manufacturers, Canadian steel became the smartest, most cost-effective, and regulation-proof choice. European buyers rushed in, Canadian exports surged. Carney summed it up. This is no longer protectionism, it's positioning. The old trade war had been transformed into a clean tech arms race. And thanks to this bold gambit, Canada wasn't just competing, it was already steps ahead, setting the terms for a new era of global trade. 3. Detroit Slide, Outpriced, Outpaced, and Outmaneuvered. Back in the US, automakers were bleeding. Ford's CEO Jim Farley told Congress the tariffs would cost $2.5 billion in 2025. Every F-Series pickup now carried an extra $900 in steel costs. Prices for top-selling models jumped by $1,500, $2,000. Mexican-built vehicles rose by 25%. The ripple spread further. Texas oil drillers ran out of pipe as Canada kept supply at home. Enbridge cannibalized old stock to keep projects alive. Small contractors were frozen out entirely. Congress begged Ottawa to ease restrictions. Carney refused, offering only limited quotas. His message: cooperate or pay. Instead of tariffs, Canada offered cleaner alternatives. Europe took them gladly. Detroit fell behind, outpaced by Canada's carbon-smart steel advantage. 4. The global pivot. Canada rewrites the steel map. Canada was no longer just America's industrial junior partner. It was charting its own course. Carney and Ontario Premier Doug Ford rolled out a Made in Canada mandate, requiring all federally funded projects, from highways to rail, to use domestic steel. Provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan followed. Exports to the U.S. slid from 75% to 68% by May 2025, while Canada expanded trade with the EU, Japan, and India. With its emissions edge, Canada secured long-term deals through 2027. Trump called it protectionism. Carney called it smart positioning. Five. Factory floor fallout, jobs, fear, and fractures. Beneath the policy battles, workers bore the brunt. In Windsor, Canada's Motor City, fourth-generation auto workers feared reliving 2008's collapse. With 19% of the city's workforce in manufacturing, layoffs spread from Hamilton's mills to London's welders. Across the border, U.S. factories relying on Canadian steel furloughed workers. Trump's 35% tariff, built on shaky fentanyl claims, fractured cross-border labor unity. For towns built on trade, the sudden rupture felt like economic whiplash, upending careers, housing, and entire futures. Verdict: steel strategy or steel trap? When the Section 232 tariffs were announced, it looked like a simple trade dispute. But this was never just about metal. It was a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess, a clash of competing visions. The American strategy was loud and protectionist, a vision rooted in rebuilding walls around its industry. But across the border, a different strategy was quietly taking shape, one based not on walls but on bridges to a new, greener global economy. Trump's tariffs, aimed at protecting American jobs, inadvertently handed Canada a generational opportunity. Instead of just retaliating, Canada pivoted. First, it accelerated its transition to cleaner steel production, investing in modern electric arc furnaces. This wasn't just an environmental gesture. It was a calculated economic move to create green steel. Second, with the U.S. market partially closed, It executed a masterful export realignment toward the European Union, which was hungry for low-carbon goods to meet its Green Deal targets. Finally, these moves combined to forge a new geopolitical edge, positioning Canada as a reliable, forward-thinking partner for a climate-conscious world, while the US risked looking stuck in the past. The fallout for the United States has been stark. Today, American automakers are caught in a vice. At home, they face inflated steel prices from the very tariffs meant to help. Abroad, they face the looming threat of the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which penalizes products made with carbon-intensive materials. The once seamless Windsor-Detroit pipeline, a marvel of cross-border manufacturing, is now fractured, disrupting supply chains and driving up costs. Carney's strategy was quiet but structural, a strategic masterstroke that left Washington scrambling to respond as its steel shield began to look more like a steel trap. This brings us to the critical questions facing America. Should the US double down on tariffs, further insulating its economy, or pivot toward a cleaner, more competitive model to compete globally? The fate of the industrial heartland hangs in the balance. Can Detroit and the Rust Belt recover before the damage from higher costs and lost competitiveness becomes permanent? And we must ask the most fundamental question: do tariffs truly help the workers they claim to protect, or do they simply save a few jobs in one protected industry at the expense of many more in others, effectively just shifting the economic pain down the supply chain? The debate is far from over and the stakes couldn't be higher. We want to know what you think. What is the right path for American industry? Share your analysis and opinions in the comments below. And if you value these deep dives into the forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe to GeoScope and hit the notification bell. We're dedicated to exploring the shifting balance of trade, technology, and power that will define the 21st century. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.